What's going on, y'all? Welcome to another episode of The Play Callers. I am one half of the dynamic duo, Stephen Boss, joined as always by my co-host, the one and the only.
Cool McCain.
So before we jump into tonight, man, I did want to give a quick shout out to one of our loyal listeners and someone who was a guest on our show just a few weeks ago. I did see Facebook told me today that Tony's birthday is today. So shout out. Happy birthday, Tony.
Absolutely.
You know, we show love to our fans. If we know all of your birthdays, I would be glad to give all y'all a shout out. But, you know, Facebook only tells me because we're Facebook friends. So if you're not my Facebook friend, I can't know what your birthday is, man. It's the way it is. So, cool, man. We got a lot to talk about today. And the big topic is going to be the college football playoffs. Because right now there's a lot of controversy about who should and shouldn't get in with all the different games being played and everything. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little college basketball. We saw last year there were a couple upsets pretty early in the season. People felt like it was a bit of a wild start to the season. But this year, there's been even more. We had 3 top 5 upsets in like a week? I mean, it was a pretty crazy start. We saw some pretty crazy games in the tournaments that just got played as well. So, what are your thoughts, man? Like, do you feel, I mean, obviously, the COVID is an issue. Schedules changing, no fans in the stands. I think we talked about that during the NBA bubble, how that's a bit of an equalizer. But what do you think is accounting for some of these early upsets that we normally wouldn't see quite as soon?
Well, one thing to take into account is the way basketball is played now. You have a lot of freshmen and sophomores that you expect to come in and be pivotal parts of the teams. I read an article, and I'm a UNC basketball fan, which Roy Williams was saying they weren't really prepared to play when they had to play in the Maui Invitational, but obviously it is what it is. You have to play. So I think that a lot of those young players are not quite where they would be if we were in a normal offseason. So I think that, can be a part of it. Obviously, jitters. I think as well, there's not as much of a talent gap as there used to be in college basketball, right? Because if you have a lot of young players that are top recruits, if you don't have the veteran presence to kind of steady them and fill in where they lack, because obviously no matter how great you are, if you're a freshman, beginning of the year, you still have things to work on in your game. So if you don't have those other pieces there to fill in, that hurts as well. Teams that may be veteran teams, but may have not played some of those higher teams before, but they got a high ranking based on where they ended up last season. You'll have some of that happening as well. And you have some teams flat out, and I won't call any names, but the players that you brought in just aren't as good as you anticipated them being.
Yeah. I mean, I think something else to account for is something me and you've had conversations about in the past. The smaller schools, or even the schools that are in Power 5 conferences but maybe aren't known as basketball schools, they tend to get guys who stick around 3-4 years. And the bigger programs are getting a lot of one and dones. At some point, if those one and dones aren't there, or if they don't show up early the way you're hoping they do, you might run into a more veteran team. And like you said, then the talent isn't quite as wide, and you end up with some of these upsets because you've got guys that have been playing together for 3-4 years. They're used to playing together, so this doesn't impact them as much. They already have chemistry with each other.
Yeah, and then flat out, some teams just don't belong where they're ranked. Like some teams, you're ranked off the name of the program, or you're ranked off expectations, and you haven't seen anything because keep in mind we didn't have the games where a lot of teams have like their white team versus whatever their team colors are. Those midnight madness games are different things that they normally have before the season starts. Those things were not allowed to be had because of the whole situation with COVID. So some of those things affected as well. And like I said, some teams, man, you believe in this team because of hype. But they've lost players. They're bringing in young guys, and you're anticipating those guys being great from the beginning, and it doesn't happen. So they're ranked higher than they should be. So then they lose, and it technically looks like an upset, but when you look back over the season, some of these games won't really be upsets.
Yeah, I mean, I think a good example of an upset that isn't really as much of an upset as people might think. We talked about, early in the season when Virginia lost to San Francisco, and that's a game that people looked at and they're like, oh man, what a huge upset. But you're talking about a team who their weakness is defending the perimeter. They're very good at guarding the paint. They pack the defense in, and it's very difficult to drive in on them. But if you can have success beyond three, that's the secret to beating them. And you had a San Francisco team that even going past that game, that's what they've continued to do. They've been very aggressive. They're averaging, I think, like 33s a game. So I think they shot like 28 in that first game and made 13 of them. So pretty efficient numbers. That's how you win games like that. The bigger concern, I think, with some of these upsets isn't necessarily what they're giving up on defense, but you kind of look at the question marks around why is the offense so bad? And some of these teams, we've seen it before. They don't do it on a consistent basis, but they put these stinkers up every now and then. And you had a combination of you have an off night on offense and somebody's able to hit your weak spot on defense, you end up with upsets.
I'll say this on the Virginia-San Francisco game. I do believe that's going to be an upset 5 years from now. Virginia had no business losing that game. You know what they did. If you can't bring in guys or you don't have guys on your team that can guard the perimeter, then shame on you for recruiting. And that's not a team that's a young team. That's a team that returned a lot of veteran players. So you should have had people on that team that can guard the perimeter better than what happened. And if you don't, then you need to think about your recruiting. And if you have them but you weren't playing them, then you need to think about your rotations. But Virginia should not have lost that game. I understand that San Francisco is a three-point team. At the end of the day, you're Virginia, heavily favored. You go into that game, you find a way to win. So shame on you, Virginia. And you consistently do this. Virginia's a team, every year they have some ridiculous game that they lose. They're the first, number one, to ever lose to a 16 in the NCAA tournament, ever. Yep. So we're talking about a team who's shown over probably the past 5 to 7 years. They'll put one of these games up at least once a year, but to do it so early in the year against this team.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree. It shouldn't have happened, but what I'm saying is it wasn't a great matchup for them. And that just means that, you have to go out there focused. And clearly they didn't. They didn't go out there and do what they should have did. The fact that they put up so little offense is, to me, more concerning than what they give up on defense, though.
Well, I will, to their defense, to that I will say they are a defensive team. That's kind of been their calling card, for the last probably 17 years. They are a defensive first team, but you've got to be able to guard the perimeter if you're going to consider yourself a defensive team. And they didn't do that.
Absolutely. So real quick, I do want to just remind everybody that's tuning in, make sure that you hit the subscribe button down in the bottom right-hand corner. If you do have anything you want to talk about tonight, throw it up in the chat. We're pretty light on topics tonight. We got a couple things we're going to spend some time on. So absolutely, we'll probably have some time at the end to answer any questions or topics you guys want to hear about. So feel free to throw those in. And also, man, earlier this week, something pretty amazing happened. Our show turned 1. Happy birthday to us, man. Happy birthday to us.
Happy birthday to the Play Call.
We are 1 years old this week, so appreciate all of our fans who tuned in and helped grow our show over the past year. And I just feel like, the best is yet to come, man. We got a few surprises coming for people. We're hoping to roll it out this week, but for sure we will have some surprises for you rolling into 2021. So be on the lookout for those.
Yeah, it's a little bit busy time, a lot of things happening right now, but definitely stay tuned because there will be some things that will be exciting and a little bit innovative that we'll have for you.
All right, so I did want to go ahead and talk a little bit about the the college basketball, just in terms of the upsets, and we can come back to some college basketball later when we're doing our picks if you want. But we got to talk about this college football playoff thing, man, because this is the hot topic right now. Everybody and their mama is talking about, in particular, Ohio State. Do they deserve to get in with 6 wins?
This is a tough question, but I'm gonna honestly have to say no. It's a toss up, but I'm gonna say no when you got a Texas A&M team, that's sitting right there, and they have a big quality win. So, and then you got Florida. So you got a couple of teams that I feel like honestly should be in consideration before Ohio State, and I'm not even really concerned with them changing the rule to allow them to play the championship game, with only 5 games and then possibly 6 if they win it. It's just the quality of their play. Ohio State hasn't came out yet that I've heard or saw and had a dominant performance against a quality team. So you're putting a team based on what they've done previously and that they're better than most of the teams in their conference, which is down this year, over teams who've played 8 to 10 games and, have proven that they can beat some quality opponents. So for me, I have to say no based on it being a fair system for every team. But I can't argue if that's the way that the committee were to decide to go, that is just like completely ridiculous. But if I had to say in it, I would say they have to no. Unless they pick up a game against one of those teams and beat them, then I'd have to say no.
So, real quick, welcome to Bohemia. Congratulated us on our 1-year anniversary. So did Sandra Cooley. Big E says, "What's up?"
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. And what's up, Big E?
So here's my argument. I'm actually going to say that Ohio State does deserve at least the consideration for this. And my reasoning is very simple. In a normal year, 6 wins makes you bowl eligible. Now, I understand that we normally wouldn't have a 6-win team competing for the actual playoffs, but they are bowl eligible with 6 wins. So in my mind, you've kind of drawn a line in the sand to say if a team has 6 wins, that is good enough for a bowl game. And it's usually going to be a lower bowl, but in this particular instance, obviously it's a weird season. So I think just based on the fact you're saying 6 wins is good enough to get into a bowl, I think that Ohio State should be considered with only those 4 or with only those 6. Now, I'll just tell you, and looking at their schedule, they mollywopped Nebraska 52-17. They beat Penn State 38-25. They beat Rutgers 49-27. They had a 1-score win over number 12 Indiana, 42-35. And then this past week, with like half their team out on COVID or whatever, they destroyed Michigan State 52-12. And they're going to play a number 14 Northwestern team, which we can debate if Northwestern deserves to be number 14. But, we'll have that conversation a little later because, there's another team that we're going to talk about in our predictions that I don't think they deserve their ranking either. So quite a bit of that going around this year, just like every year. So I actually think they deserve some consideration. Now, where it gets interesting for me is when you start kind of looking at the different things that could play out with some of the other teams. So we have basically 2 games that kind of decide things. It would be interesting if Florida and Clemson both win the ACC SEC championship games respectively, because then I think you have a very good argument for having those 4 teams basically all in the playoffs. And by that I mean Alabama, Florida, Clemson, and Notre Dame. Because you're basically talking about 4 one-loss teams that have played 10, 11, 12 games, whatever, and their losses are to each other, basically.
So,
And Florida lost to Texas A&M, but Texas A&M is up there too.
so here's my my thing with Ohio State. You name their games: Nebraska, Penn State, Rutgers, and Michigan State are not very good teams. Indiana, okay, fairly decent team. You can debate yes or no if they should be ranked as high as they are. That was a close win for Ohio State, barely win in their most challenging game for the year. So depending on what happens with Northwestern, and of course we're assuming they beat Northwestern, but even if you beat Northwestern, if it's not a mollywhopping, then you're not really telling a committee who's looking at, because think about it. You're using, 6 games, you're bowl eligible, you're using a lot of things in your argument that, they do make sense. But if you're the committee, what I'm doing is I'm framing what I'm saying as if I'm on the committee looking at who should be in these games. Should Ohio State get consideration? Absolutely, they're undefeated if they win this game. But should they actually be in? The answer to that question has to be no, with 6 wins and only 1 being against, up to now, against a good team. And that was a tight game that you barely won. So when I look at it, I say, does that pass an eye test? No. What you've done up until this point does not pass the eye test for someone to say, this is a team who should be in. Should we consider you because you're 5-0, you're undefeated? That's reasonable. It's reasonable to consider a team that's undefeated for the playoffs. When you look at that, there's only been 5 games. Like I said, they've only won one. They only have one "quote unquote" quality win against Indiana. I mean, you can debate that all day, but they are a ranked team. So to me, unless they go out and they really destroy Northwestern, if I were Ohio State, once I found out that Michigan couldn't play, my thing would be, who can I get a game with to replace this game, right? Because there's got to be other teams out there who would like to have another game. I was told, I didn't have an opportunity to research it by someone else I know that kind of, delves into sports, that Texas A&M reached out to Ohio State about them possibly playing. But even if they did, there had to be some team Ohio State could reach out to and say, hey, let's get together and get a game in. We're good to go with COVID now. You guys are good to go. Let's try to get a game in. We could use another game. You guys can use another game. I mean, that's kind of where you're at for this season. I know it's happened to a couple of teams this season just because of how things are going. It happened in basketball. Tar Heels reached out and they have another game that they're going to play Saturday for basketball because they had a game that got canceled. So you're kind of in a world where you have to think outside of the box if you really want to try to be your best team. You're in this level where we're at now, where 4 teams get a chance to win a championship. You've got to do what it takes to make a good argument for yourself. 5 wins up to now, possibly 6. That keeps you enough in the conversation, but you can make several arguments that other teams should get it above them where they sit at now.
So just an FYI, I know the source that you have for your information, so I decided to look it up, and you were very correct to put the disclaimer on there because there's nothing in the article that suggests that Texas A&M actually reached out. The idea was floated that they could play each other because Ole Miss also had to cancel their game against Texas A&M. So they were looking at another team that had a bye the same week. And the only thing this article mentions is that Jimbo Fisher said they would not be playing Ohio State, that they will be taking the week off and honoring their seniors and focusing on recruiting. So,
well, like I said, I haven't researched it. It's what I was told, but I haven't had a chance to confirm it. So therefore, I was confirmed that was not correct.
Yeah, I was told the same thing by the same source as you. So that's why. And I also meant to look it up earlier and I forgot. So that's why while you were talking, I went ahead and looked it up real quick. I figured it wouldn't take long to verify, man. I figured it should be pretty easy to verify or not.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
but yeah, my argument I think comes down to if Florida beats Alabama and Clemson beats Notre Dame, I will not be upset if Ohio State gets in over one of those four teams. I also wouldn't complain if they got left out in that equation.
Right.
But if Clemson or Florida loses and takes a second L,
They got to be out.
I absolutely think that Ohio State deserves that spot. Now,
Yeah.
could you maybe argue that a one-loss A&M team deserves it over Ohio State? That's debatable. You could argue that. And again, I wouldn't necessarily be mad at that if that happened.
Right.
But if you have one of these two teams that already have a loss playing in these championship games, or they lose and have a second loss,
they got to
and
be
you
out.
put them in over Ohio State just because they only play 6 games, to me that's garbage.
Yeah, they got to be out. But I think, the Texas A&M is another team. Like I said, I think you're really down to about 6 teams now.
Yeah.
All right, you're down to about 6 teams, unless something dramatic happens that we're not anticipating, that really have an opportunity to make the playoffs. The argument is just, when all is said and done, when the committee makes their decision, who should be 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I think Clemson and Alabama win, they're going to stay in. Notre Dame loses, I think they'll stay in, but I think they'll slide to 4 if it's close. So I think also for the teams that could win and not have a loss already, if they lose and it's close, that could be enough to still keep them in, especially Clemson and Notre Dame, because they played each other one time. So if you have Clemson go out there and beat Notre Dame by a touchdown or by 10 points or so, maybe even 2 touchdowns, if it's, they pull their starters and it ends up being like a two-score game at the end. If you can keep it that close, I do believe that Notre Dame could still, be in that top 4. But if we talk about, Florida getting blown out, Notre Dame getting blown out, that could change things. We talk about Clemson losing. They're clearly out. If they get a second loss, you're clearly out of there. They're kind of getting a pass on the loss. It's funny with that particular situation. I thought about this a couple of days ago. So Notre Dame is getting a lot of credit for beating Clemson without their starting quarterback.
Right.
But by the same token, Clemson's getting praise for losing without that quarterback.
Right.
So essentially, both teams are benefiting from not having the starting quarterback, which I think is interesting.
It's almost like they went to the SEC or something, man.
Well, I tell you, man, when Notre Dame elected to play football this year, we talked about this on the show, and I said when it happened, I could see a lot of scenarios where both of those guys get in because Notre Dame's that team is always lingering around, but because they weren't in a conference, they didn't have a conference championship game that they could play. So you can't win it if you don't play in it, and a lot of times that hurt them, being independent. So this was definitely the year for them to do what they've done. They've beaten everybody that they've come across. It's debatable if they would have lost to Clemson if they had their quarterback, but we know that they beat them without the quarterback. So now we'll see.
Right.
If they keep it close, like I said, I think they stay in there even if they lose.
Yeah, I think that win was really important for Notre Dame because if they lose that first game with Clemson and having their backup quarterback in, then we're not even talking about Notre Dame even being in this conversation right now. We're talking about maybe, we're like, hey, if they can go into the SEC or the ACC championship game and win, then maybe they get back in that conversation. But that's the big if for them. And see, I think it's interesting because in my mind, I feel like, hey, Texas A&M beat Florida, and yet Florida is going to get to play in the SEC's championship game because the SEC decided to keep the traditional East-West thing going. Whereas everybody else just said, hey, we're going to take the top 2 teams and they're going to play each other in the championship regardless of what side of the conference they're on. So to me, Florida shouldn't even be in this game. This should be Texas A&M should be playing Alabama again. Of course, when it comes to the argument of possibly putting Texas A&M in with a Florida loss to Alabama, of course, the conversation is going to turn to how bad of a loss is it because Texas A&M did get beat by 3 touchdowns against Alabama.
Yeah.
So that's going to obviously come into the conversation.
That's true. We did a comment that they might surprise us, and anything is possible, definitely. But you know, I do think that they did us all a disservice. The SEC did by not doing like everyone else, just saying two best teams play. This was the perfect year to do that. But I think they wanted to keep things as traditional as possible, which they did. But now we're looking at it and saying, was that really a good idea? And this was said by many, pundits on different shows when they made the decision. Why not do like everyone else? Best two teams play. Let's alleviate the divisions this year. Let your best two teams play. You may never get another chance to have this happen. And the SEC decided, nah, we're not going to do that. We're just going to stick with what we've been doing because we don't want to do anything different because we may have to stick to.
Yeah. So one thing I think is interesting, we all know that a lot of colleges are losing money this year by not being able to have full capacity in the stadiums, and in some cases, no fans at all. So there's obviously a lot of money being lost this year. This was the year that I think you had an opportunity to say, you know what, we're going to expand the playoffs. Everybody wants it anyways. This would have been the perfect year for you to do it and bring in some extra revenue by having additional bowl games that actually mean something. So I'm actually a bit shocked that the powers to be, who we all know all they care about really is money, didn't capitalize on this opportunity this year to finally give the fans what they've been clamoring for and expand the playoffs out. So let's just pretend, for the sake of argument, that they actually do expand the playoffs next year. What does a perfect playoff system look like to you?
So, first thing I have to say is it's so bad with the bowl games this year that you had Boston College decline an invitation to a bowl game. They basically said, we're okay. We talked to the student athletes and they don't want to play. So you literally had Boston College decline a bowl game, and then you had LSU go ahead and take their own internally decided sanctions to not go to a bowl game this year. So basically they're declining the bowl game too. So you essentially have two teams that are just saying, it's okay, we don't even want to go to a bowl game, we're good. So you make a great point. If you make some of those games count this year, then you have people wanting to play in them. You get good matchups. Fans are one thing because a lot of states are going crazy and not following the right rules, and so fans are not there, and not as many people as could be there. So that's hurting revenue. But you can make those things more important because honestly, a lot of these bowl games, if you got teams that are 3-3, 2-6 or 6-5, no one's going to care unless it's your team. No one's going to care. But if you made if you made the playoff expand this year, this would have been a great opportunity. For me, to answer your actual question, you have to go to 8 teams for it to be a viable playoff. Now, if you don't want to immediately go to 8, you can go to 6. But you really need to go to 8 for it to be a viable playoff. The reason is you have 5 power conferences. Every one of them should get their champion in. That's, you could debate if one league is not good enough or bad enough. But if you got 8 teams, every team can get their champion in the Power 5 schools. That still leaves 3 available slots. So then you have someone like a Texas A&M this year, who they're in a conference with another team. The only loss is to someone in their division. They go undefeated the rest of the way. They look impressive, but they don't get a chance to play in their championship game because of that one loss they have. That's going to happen from year to year. Probably not in the same conference every year, but that's going to happen. You throw them in there. There's 6 teams. You still got 2 spots. Now we can look at getting one of the smaller non-Power 5 schools in, the best of that lot. Let one of them hop in and play. And then either another small school, another Power 5 school, or independent. So I say 8 is a good number because you're doubling what you have now. The logistics of the games, there's no one that gets a bye because if you go to 6, then obviously the top 2 have to get a bye. You go to 8, everybody has to play. Once you get into that top 8 and that's decided, then I think you should re-rank them if we use this as well. And what I mean by that is, say Alabama's number one because they won the SEC. But they have a loss. Clemson's sitting over here at 13-0. They don't have a loss. But they're number two because Alabama's number one based off who they are, even though, they may have lost the game. Just for example. Let's re-rank it. Clemson's got the better record. Clemson's number one. Alabama's got a loss. You can't be number one with a loss if there's undefeated teams. So you have to slide down in place as the top one-loss team. So I think then you add some another layer to it. You make it more interesting. And again, you're allowing for the non-Power 5 schools to have some representation in the championship. If you never do that, then you're never going to get to a point where these other schools are going to be able to build like they need to. You're going to continue to have the schools like Alabama, Clemson, and certain universities just hoard all the talent. If you spread it out more and say you can go to a non-Power 5 school or not the best school in the conference and have a chance to get there at least once during your 4 years, you make it more viable. You allow the talent to spread out. Those are two things that are hurting the NCAA right now. So fix it with 8 teams.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, Billy Venable says congratulations on our first year. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay,
So I agree. We got to go to 8. And my couple of changes I want to see made. Number one, I want to see us do away with preseason polls. I want to actually wait until at least week 8, which is when they normally release the playoff rankings anyways. And let's just really see what teams look like come week 8. Because a lot of these rankings, they get based off of, such and such was ranked somewhere when they beat them or whatever. And you're not taking into account that team now is horrible. So you're giving a lot of times teams credit for that, or you have a team that maybe started off slow who's now on fire. And because they started off slow and maybe took a loss or two early in the season, they're ranked low, but they're a really good football team that should be ranked higher if it weren't for a couple early season losses. But they're playing like a top-ranked team at that point. So when you start looking at the numbers as opposed to looking at the teams, I think you get in trouble. The other thing I think you would have to have is some set rules for who gets in. And obviously, if you go to 8, even if you go to 6, one of the things you can do is you can say each of the Power 5 conferences, whoever wins the conference, gets in. You have an automatic bid. You never hear anybody complain about the NFL. No one ever says that a team that should have gotten into the playoffs in the NFL got left out. The closest you have to a complaint is when you have a team who has a losing record or a team with a lesser record who wins their division that gets in over a wild card team that got left out because their record, even though it was better than the division winner. But even then, people don't complain loudly because they're like, hey, that's what it is. You win your division, you get in. Everybody knew that going into the season. So if you do something like that, I think that will cut down on a lot of the complaints. Win your division, win your conference, and you get in. So if you're going to 6 teams, you could do one at-large for a non-Power 5 school. You could maybe say you're going to have a committee choose who they feel like the best non-Power 5 team is and put them in a 6. I'd rather see them go to 8. You can still give that automatic bid to one non-Power 5 team, but then it gives you flexibility for who you want to use the other 2 spots for. So that's what I would like to see them do personally. I'd also like to see a little bit more inter-conference play. I would like to see some matchups, like if Alabama wins the SEC and Clemson wins the ACC. I want to see Alabama and Clemson play each other. I don't want to see Alabama playing Georgia Tech.
I don't want to see them playing Duke. Alabama State University either. I want to see them play some. Yeah,
it's like you. Yeah, you see, the SEC, man, we beat the ACC team. It's like, dude, it was Alabama against Duke. Come on, and not in basketball.
Yeah, I would like to see them, and obviously you can't always make sure it's the best 2 teams because the teams change from year to year. But I would like to see Alabama say, hey, we'll play You know, Clemson, or when they're good, like Miami's been good, decent the last few years. Some of those teams are a little bit better versus Georgia Tech, Duke, uh, you know, Florida State right now. You know what I'm saying? Teams that just haven't played well, because it's easy
Yeah.
to say I want to play somebody that hasn't played well, right? And you
Hmm.
still could get spanked because that team could improve. But I'm saying when you're making the decisions, base it off of how the teams are doing now. Like you said, Clemson's been a really good team consistently for the last about 7 years or so. So them playing Alabama would be a great game that people want to see.
Yeah.
National championship implications in the regular season. Let's get some of those games. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, it would just be a nice little break. And the thing is, it
Yep,
wouldn't make it such a big deal if you have a loss on your record.
exactly. Your
So
only loss is to another, top ranked team. You know,
yeah. So that there's just a few of the things I would like to see them do. At the very least, I hope they'll at least expand the playoffs all next year. Because let's be real, if you can't get a non-power five team into the playoffs this year, you're never going to get one in without expanding them.
yeah, you're not going to get one in without expanding. That's been clear from the beginning. You're not
Yeah.
even getting all five of the power five in every.
Yeah, and
You know
I'll
what
tell
I'm
you,
saying?
man, going back to Ohio State, my issue with the people who want to complain about Ohio State possibly getting into the playoffs with only 6 wins, here's my issue. The committee has basically decided every single year who gets in those 4 spots based on different criteria. Every year. They just pick and choose whatever fits them. One year it's how this team didn't play in a conference championship game. The next year they put in somebody that didn't play in a conference championship game. So they're all over the board. They pick the 4 teams they're going to put in. They find some excuse to put them in unless the team makes it impossible for them to do so. And they just find a way to justify it. So don't give me this nonsense about the 6 games, because if the committee wants for the Big Ten to be in, Ohio State is going to be the representative, and they're going to find a way to get them in, and they don't care about the fact they only play 6 games. So you might as well just not even argue about it.
Well, my thing is, what I can't agree with what you're saying. You also have to look at it this way. For what you're talking about, making sure someone gets in, that's normally the Crimson Tide. That's normally the team
Oh
that
yeah,
they make sure that they change the criteria for them to get in. Every once in a while, they may do it for another team, but it's usually somebody from the SEC. So
now the
I
SEC
don't.
has been a beneficiary lately, but
Yeah,
let's not forget who the love child was before the SEC got big. It was the
that's so
Big
long.
Ten.
That's so long ago, man. They don't want to make the mistakes they made back then again. The Big Ten is definitely not what it once was. Um, but at the end of the day, I don't believe that Ohio State is going to not get in. But I honestly don't believe they should get.
So Sander agrees with 8 teams, gives more teams a chance to show their
Yeah,
talent. And the thing is, you know, I feel like every year there's a team that's sitting at 6 or 7 who they might not be the best team, but maybe they match up well with somebody. They just don't have a chance. And so if you go to 8 teams, now they get an opportunity. There might be some upsets, and upsets always make playoffs more interesting. So I let's do it. Let's get to 8. That's what I think we should do.
yeah. But legitimately, you need that. You need the 8 teams because you need the representation. You say you have 5 power conferences. So if you have 5 power conferences, how come you don't have more than 5 slots?
Yeah.
So you're basically saying, even though you're a Power Five conference, one conference is normally getting treated like a non-Power Five conference, and that's normally the Pac-12.
Yeah.
We haven't discussed the Pac-12 team, but probably all season.
Yeah. And am I mistaken, or is USC undefeated?
Hmm. That's a great
We
question.
Let's look that up because I want to say they might actually be undefeated. Yeah, they're sitting at 4-0.
But they only have 4 wins, man. They only have 4 wins.
Yeah, but I mean, they
You
are
know
still
them to get
undefeated
into?
though. Yeah, so
They
that's
only play
why if
five
we
games. Do they get in?
no, they gotta play six, man. You gotta be six. You gotta get 6 to be bowl eligible.
Well, not according to the Big Ten.
No, the Big Ten say you only had to get 5 to go to their championship game. That's not the same as a bowl.
I know, but I'm saying they would let them. They would let Ohio. Let's be real. If Ohio State played 4 games, the Big Ten would let them in that championship game.
Yeah, but then you kind of lose the argument of 6 games made you bowl eligible. So
Well, I'm not making an argument. You're the one making
yeah,
that argument.
well I know
I don't
and
even think that doesn't even apply this year.
I know, but that's
I don't
why
even
I'm
think
just
you have
telling
to
you
play.
that for me. Yeah, I'm just saying for me, if Ohio State only had 4, I wouldn't say they deserve to get in.
For
I
me,
mean, obviously, clearly I have no authority whatsoever. But
I'm just saying. I mean, if because the 6 games doesn't really matter this year, you don't even have to win like more games than you lose. You can still get into a bowl game. Hey, you got teams turning bowl games down, so we already know. Small corner Louisiana State University might be in a bowl this year.
well, man, they did remove all the restrictions for bowl games this year, so
Yeah,
even Florida State can get a bowl game.
there you go.
We might not have enough people to play in it, but we could get one.
Well, hey, man, you can get one magically. You'll probably have enough people that can play.
The way we go, we're gonna be like Denver. We're gonna be asking if we can put some assistants on the active roster. Like I think this dude got a year eligibility. Like we can put him in. We can
And
bring
just like
We can bring Peter Ward back or something.
and just like they did Denver, they'll be like, no.
I think Pete got a year eligibility left, man. We can bring Peter Ward back.
They're like, yeah, that was 10 years ago. No.
So before we get into our picks, man, did want to discuss a couple of things in the NBA right now. Paul George did get a max deal with the Clippers. So I'm just gonna go ahead and ask you, based on your reaction, to go ahead and give me your thoughts on that verbally.
So, no joke. I saw that, right? And I had to look and make sure it wasn't Deadspin. You know, the site that always gives you like the fake news to be funny.
That was the Onion.
So, yeah, like the Onion, Deadspin's another one. So I'm like, is this for real? So then I'm like, yeah, it's for real. So I'm watching shows today, and they're like, it's a great idea because if it works out, then you already have Paul George in the contract, and you can use that to get Kawhi to stay. If it doesn't work out and Kawhi doesn't want to stay, then you could just trade Paul George's contract. Look, somebody just traded for John Wall. No disrespect to Paul George, because if I try to play Paul George one-on-one, if we were playing a 21, it would probably be 21 and -10. So no disrespect to Paul George, but the kind of money that they gave him is reserved for people who can help you win or be the face of your franchise. And if we're talking regular season, Paul George is one of the probably top 10 players in the NBA. But as soon as we get into the playoffs, Paul George is not the same guy. So if I'm the Clippers, you have to have some under the table agreement with Kawhi Leonard that if we pay him, you're going to stay. Or this deal makes no sense. And there's no way anyone's going to take this contract from you unless someone has a worse contract for a worse player that they're going to dump on you.
Yeah, I don't get it because when I saw the number, I was still thinking, wait, what did we just pay Anthony Davis? I mean, that's crazy to think that they just committed that kind of money to him. And the thing is, after committing that kind of money to him for that term of time, if you now re-sign Kawhi, you're going to have to give him basically the same deal. I don't know how many years he has in, if he's able to make the Supermax yet or not. But when you look at it, it's not going to leave you a lot of cap space afterwards. So You better hope that the rest of those guys are planning on resigning too, if you're able to do anything.
for league minimum deals. Yeah, I agree with
Yeah,
you. Definitely crazy. I cannot believe they did that.
yeah. I mean, it's just wow. But
Next thing you
speaking
know, they're
of
gonna trade for
things
James
that
Harden. They're gonna trade for James Harden next.
look like I was about to say though, speaking of things that people shouldn't have did, it was crazy. So we stood on this show a couple weeks back, and both said that if Houston was smart, they were going to trade James Harden and they were going to keep Russell Westbrook. You now very seriously look like in one offseason you've gone from making the second round of the playoffs to getting rid of your two superstars, your head coach who has won you a lot of games, and your general manager, and all you have left in return is John Wall and a first round pick.
Well, they're gonna get a large bounty on James Harden.
Yeah, I don't understand it, man. Like no matter what you get for James Harden, this move just made no sense. You just basically got to a point where you're just like, you know what, just screw it. We're just gonna start over. Like all the way over. Like from
Well,
scratch.
the thing that I didn't understand was you were doing all these things to appease James Harden, and did you not think that once he couldn't find someone to play with that could help him win, that he was going to be like everybody else? Well, I can't win by myself. I want to go play with somebody else. So now he's okay with being traded to the Bucks. He's okay with being traded to the Heat. He's okay with being traded to the Sixers. Getting a pattern here. He's okay with being traded to the Nets. All these teams are in the Eastern Conference, and they're the better, or who we expect to be the better teams. Billy V talking about can't forget about Boogie.
I'll go respond to Billy's comments. I ain't forget.
No, man, you just
If yeah, if we were talking about Boogie coming off the bench in LA, that's a lot different than you talking about Boogie trying to be a cornerstone of your team. But yeah, I don't get it, man. Like it just made no sense. Like it's like you said, at what point in all this move making did you up and say to yourself, you know what? We can just go ahead and do all these moves to keep James Harden happy. And he's gonna stay here and be happy. But James Harden had to look at the roster and be like, okay, so the Lakers got better. The Clippers are good. New Orleans is coming up. Denver's still a great team. Utah's got a great up and coming team. Dallas is a team that's loaded with some talent. And you went out and you got me John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins, who between them have like a half a good knee.
And no Achilles at all. They got some rubber bands in there instead of Achilles.
I'm like, bro. I would have won out too if I was James Harden.
Well, the thing too is, this dude didn't even show up for training camp. He out partying with Lil Baby with no mask on.
No mask on.
So now he got to pass like 6 COVID tests before he can even join the team.
Yeah, it don't make no sense, man. Like I can't even wrap my head around what they were thinking in Houston, because it's like you literally have nothing that was there last year is all gone.
And furthermore, James Harden, you can't win a championship with him. What person can you put with James Harden? Talked about this when the trade happened last week. If you take Russell Westbrook and you give him a lot of talent around him, because he's a triple-double machine, he'll give up the rock. It's not hard to get 20 points if you're Russell Westbrook. So he'll give up the rock. He'll go in, he'll rebound, he'll do all those things because that's his game, right? He's very explosive offensively. He uses his athletic ability, but he doesn't mind pushing the ball and giving it up. Harden is a ball-dominant guard who likes to have the ball on the side. And I said this last year when we first started, when they are on the team together, this could work or it could not work because they're dynamic. You bring in John Wall, another ball dominant guard. Now Harden wants out. Oh, but you only want to go to teams that can win. But the team you're on can't win because of what you want. Now you want to go to these other teams, but you're not thinking. If you go to Miami, they're going to have to give up Tyler Hero. If you give up Tyler Hero for James Harden, because Hero's young, he's not as good as James Harden now, but he's on the upswing. James Harden is no longer on the upswing. Right? You worry about chemistry. Again, a ball dominant guard. I would not put him in Brooklyn. Philadelphia, I can see just because Philadelphia's the best option, but they're not going to give up. And if I was them, I'd give up Ben Simmons for James Harden. I give up Ben Simmons and some draft picks for James Harden any day of the week. If I was
Philadelphia. But they're not going to. They, for whatever reason, they are like in love with Ben Simmons, but I don't know why, because he hasn't really shown that he is going to get it done for them.
Ben Simmons could go tomorrow if I was Philadelphia. Now, Milwaukee, the problem is you'd have to give up probably Chris Middleton and something else. So if James Harden was to go to one of these teams, they're going to have to more than likely give up a quality piece in return. If they're going to send James Harden to Brooklyn, who are you going to send? They're not going to take Karis LeVert and a draft pick. They're going to want Kyrie. And then if they get Kyrie, you know Kevin Durant's going to throw a fit. Because that's the whole reason he went to Brooklyn, to play with him.
Yeah. And the thing is, let's say even if they didn't have to give up Kyrie, let's just say that they give up a bunch of secondary guys and a whole bunch of draft picks and everything else. I don't even feel like the three of them coexist on the court very well together.
Dude, if you put them three on the court, you're not trying to win. Like, at that point, you're not trying to win games. That is a horrible suggestion. And I don't know how that would work unless one of them are not going to start. Now, if you're going to tell James Harden, we're going to put you in with a second unit and you can shoot all day, okay, and he was okay with that, you make him make that work. But if you're going to try to start all three of those guys, you got to get a second basketball. Because one ain't going to be enough.
I'm already over here curious to see how Durant and Kyrie going to get along together. Right. You had James Harden that winning balls. It's that ain't gonna happen, bro.
And they have a third option, dude, Karis LeVert, that went off in the bubble. He's a good, he's a good player, so he could be number 3. But then the question even begins there. He goes from being the main option because they were both hurt the most of the year to now he's got to be not even Robin. He goes from being like Batman to being Batgirl, like the third one.
The Kyle Kuzma situation,
right? And we see how Kyle Kuzma handled that.
Not very well.
Not very well at all. It's difficult, man. I mean, if you go from being number 1 to number 2, okay, I still get my shots, I still get the rock, I still whatever. But you go from being number 1 to being number 3 option, that's tough.
It is, man. Wait, man, we got about 6-7 minutes left here, so we want to go ahead and get our picks in. So I'm going to let you throw the games out there this week. Let me know what games you want to pick.
All right, so I'm going to start off with a personal favorite in college. We got number 17, North Carolina, against number 10, Miami. I'm going Miami by 3 touchdowns.
Well, I'm going to be honest. I haven't watched UNC since they lost to Florida State. I know they haven't lost any more games. At least I don't think they've lost any more games. They're number 17. What I saw was a team that is very good offensively and very questionable defensively. What I see in Miami is a team that is not great on either side of the ball, but has some explosiveness on offense and is very good on defense. I would be shocked if Carolina even has a chance in this game. I definitely think Miami's going to win. And it pains me to say that.
I so love to hear that. Looking at NFL, a game that I think is going to be a lot more interesting. I think we know who's going to win, but a game that's going to be very exciting to watch is Kansas City and Miami. Because we're going to get Pat Mahomes I know your mom says she wants to call you Patrick, but Pat Mahomes, and Tua. So I think that could be good just to see Mahomes a couple years into his career, been a Super Bowl MVP, has a Super Bowl championship, MVP candidate against a guy that's up and coming, and a team that's up and coming that's actually second in their division only by a game. So I think this could be a much better game than most would have anticipated when looking at the schedule. Of course, Kansas City's going to win, but just for the sake of, seeing a good game, I think this is one to watch.
To quote someone else, not so fast, my friend. I got Miami's. I'm picking Miami again. I'm going Miami 2-0 this week.
Hey, the first Miami, I'm good with. I'm good with this, but I just think that Kansas City's going to win this game. But hey,
I'm calling for the upset.
There's always got to be an upset. Now, another good game: Minnesota at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's had a couple of weeks off, on and off. They haven't really been gelling like people anticipate. I think the big problem is Arians and Brady are now on the same page on what they're doing offensively, incorporating Antonio Brown in with all the other weapons. So Minnesota's been on the roll of sorts. Kirk Cousins is doing what he always does at the end of the year, which is play better than he did at the beginning of the year. And then they've got Dalvin Cook, if he can stay healthy, running the ball. They've got Thielen back. So I'm actually going to go Minnesota with the upset.
Yeah, this is a tough one. And what it boils down to for me is I think Tampa's defense will play just good enough to limit Kirk Cousins. And they may be able to force him into a bad game. And if Tom Brady and Bruce Arians truly are on the same page now, I think that gives them a little bit of an edge. So if they come out there and they say they're on the same page, but then they're not being on the same page, I definitely think the upset could happen. But I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt for the moment that they are, and I'm going to pick Tampa.
I don't think they are.
I don't think so either, but I'm giving the benefit of the doubt.
There's only really 3 other good games going to be on. We're going to have Indianapolis and Vegas. I've been riding with Vegas all year. I'm not going to stop now. I'm going to go Vegas.
I'm taking Indy.
You have Pittsburgh and Buffalo. This one is the toughest game of the week for me to pick. The toughest. Because I do believe Buffalo's the better team. But the matchup could work well for Pittsburgh. But I am going to go Buffalo.
I'm going to take Ben Roethlisberger Jr., and that would be Josh Allen. I'm going to go Buffalo.
And, of course, the Monday night game is probably either the best game of the week or a game that shouldn't be on Monday night. I'm going to say Baltimore gets it together and wins this game against Cleveland.
Yeah, Cleveland is a team that has definitely been playing a lot better, but I also think that Baltimore is a team that at some point they really got to kind of like come out of the funk that they had been in.
Yeah.
And I think on Monday Night Football, it is going to be a great time for them to do that. So I'm going to go with Baltimore too. Some of the Monday night games get teams back on track sometimes.
Oh, yeah, definitely. One other thing I wanted to quickly talk about, it won't take long. We've had a quarterback change in the NFL, not due to injury or coronavirus, but actually a benching. And that's in Philadelphia. We've had Jalen Hurts going to get his first start against New Orleans. Carson Wentz has been benched. I've seen a lot of assumptions that this is a season-long thing, but if you listen to Doug Peterson's press conferences, it's basically non-committal either way. So what I think is happening is we're going to have a week-to-week thing, and he may decide to stick with Hurts, but I don't think he's going to make a decision until that week on who's going to be the start. Hurts has his opportunity. It's not a great situation for him. First start against a defense that has just been destroying quarterbacks all year. So good luck with that. I've said several times, I'm a fan of the Eagles, not a Carson Wentz fan, not a Jalen Hurts fan. Whoever gives us the best chance to win, that's who I like. But honestly, for the rest of this year, I'm okay if we just lose. Let's get a good draft pick. Let's get someone who knows how to actually draft to control the draft, and let's start to rebuild the team. If that's around Hurts, I'm okay with that. If that's around Wentz, I'm fine with that. But whoever you put back there, we got to get the lineman back, and you got to get a quality, low-cost wide receiver option that can play. You don't have a number one. Whoever you put back there is behind a rickety line without a number one receiver, and that's not a winning combination.
Touche, man, touche. My thing is when I look at the Eagles, and even you had this conversation offline, but I kept hearing all these announcers, everybody else, all they talked about is Carson Wentz, his potential, his potential, his potential. Oh, he's so talented, he should be able to do this and that, but he ain't doing it. And at some point, it has to stop being about what you should be able to do and what maybe you showed in a period of time that you could do, and it has to be about what you are doing. And me and you've had the same conversation about my quarterback in San Francisco and Jimmy Garoppolo. When Jimmy first came over, he looked like the answer. Ever since he injured his ACL, he has not looked as good. He's looked good in spurts. We've seen games where he's gone out there and played well, but I haven't seen enough consistently out of him. So if we draft a quarterback this year in the draft to replace him, or we go out and get somebody in free agency, I'm not going to be mad. I think that, there comes a point where you stop looking at people's potential and you see what somebody else has. When you look at Jalen Hurts, he's a guy that he might go out there and get it done. He might not. I think this is a good opportunity for him to go out there against a really good defense. And he doesn't necessarily have to win Philadelphia this game, but he needs to show a lot more fight than Carson Wentz showed if he wants to keep this job.
Yep. Definitely. We did have Billy V make a couple of picks in the comments with us as well. He's going with Kansas City, and he's going with Tampa Bay.
I agree with some of that.
I know which one you don't agree with.
the one that's opposite of what I picked.
That would be the one. Guys.
Hey man, we appreciate you still commenting though, Billy. Even though we disagree. Well, I disagree with you.
Now, starting next football season, we're going to do what we're doing, pick a couple of games, and we're going to actually keep track. If you guys want to put who you think is going to be in there, we can keep track of you guys as well, and we can talk about how we're doing week to week with our picks. So that'll be something that we'll be implementing for next season. So stay tuned for that.
So we did have a question here about Adam Gase finally getting fired, and this is my working theory on Adam Gase. I think the Jets are afraid to fire him because every team this year, when they have fired their coach, they have won the next game. The Jets are like, hey, the only chance we had to guarantee that we get Trevor Lawrence is if we keep Adam Gase into the end of the season. So, Jets fans, hold on. It's coming.
Yes,
but it's not going to be. Yeah, but it's not going to be until Black Monday.
Yeah,
it's going to be after the season. As soon as they look, matter of fact, it won't even be Black Monday because you know what?
It's going to be Sunday that ends the season. Yeah.
Yeah. As soon as the clock runs out on the last play of the game, they're going to literally be putting the pink slip on his door and have all his stuff already sitting in a basket in a little box outside the door, and they're gonna have a guard waiting to escort him out.
It's gonna be breaking news.
He said they better fire him on the field.
Adam Gase has been relieved of his duties as head coach.
He said they better fire him on the field on CBS.
You want the owner to walk down after the game and hand him his pink slip, and then grab the microphone and do a Vince McMahon. You're fired. Is that what you like,
He was
Steven?
he was the commentators give a play by play on it. Oh, and Gase goes down.
But yeah, that's. I mean, I actually have to agree. What I don't get with the Jets is why did you fire the defensive coordinator? You weren't trying to win that game.
No.
Come on, you weren't trying to.
That's why they fired the defensive coordinator. He was out there. He out there still trying.
True.
Greg Williams out there trying to win games. And he's like, nah, bro, what you doing? We already traded away your best player. You still out there trying to win.
Yeah, they're like, hold on, now you trying to blitz and win games? Oh yeah, get him out of here. You gotta go.
You gotta go, man. We ain't trying to win nothing this year. Trying to mess us up on that number one pick. So yeah, sorry, Steven, but that's why y'all still got Adam Gase until the end of the year. Just take some solace in knowing that every game that Adam Gase coaches gets you one step closer to Trevor Lawrence. That's my consolation for you, sir.
Yeah, and we're gonna talk next week. There's been a lot of coaches that have been let go. Some of them I don't necessarily agree with, but we'll talk more about that next week. So, guys, tune in next week. We're going to be talking some NFL, of course. And, we'd love to get you guys picks as well. So when we're making our picks, man, feel free to hop in and, drop your picks as well. And, 1-year-old, loving it, excited. We're going to see what year 2 holds. Yep. You guys will be excited. And then, of course, everyone is watching. Tell a friend. Tell them to check us out next week. They'll enjoy.
Absolutely, man. And again, appreciate everybody who tunes in. Appreciate everyone who's subscribed, getting notifications, tuning in every week, man. It's just been so awesome to watch this thing grow and just to have y'all be a part of it, man. So much love and appreciation for everybody. But with that, man, it's Boston Cool reminding you that even the sun goes down.
And heroes eventually die.
And horoscopes often lie.
But sometimes why?
Nothing is for show.
Nothing is for certain.
But until they close the curtain,
it's him and I.
The play callers. Y'all better know that.
Yay!
ATL to Charlotte, North Carolina. See y'all next Friday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Tell a friend.